So today we're joined by Dr. Tommy Perkins and Dr. Ed Cantelo, two GPs who set up Medics Money, which is a fantastic free service that empowers doctors, dentists, and other professionals to make better decisions with their money. Hello, Tommy and Ed.
Hi, guys.
Hiya.
And Dennis.
I know. We've already started enthusiastically.
Here as well. Okay, listen, you're both very well known to your readers and your listeners from Medics Money. But for our listeners on the Century Plan, can you both give us a bit of background about how you came to be GPs? Who's going to go first?
Yeah, I'm very happy to go first. I mean, mine's a bit more of an unusual story, I think, than for most, because I became a GP much later in life than is the norm. I went to medical school much later, obviously, of course, as well. I originally went to university first time round and read economics, and I graduated in 2002, and then I went straight on to PwC in London, where I joined a personal tax team there. I studied for my chartered accountant exams and then my chartered tax advisor exams in 2006. And then in 2009, so not long after my 29th birthday, I had an accident, which turned out to be nothing overly serious, but it was my first kind of experience of healthcare. It led me to think about what I was doing. And then, it sounds really far-fetched, but, by complete coincidence, around this time, I read an article on the way home from work. So I used to get the tube from Embankment Tube Station back home. And I always used to get the Evening Standard religiously at that time. And in that, there was an article that talked about how people were coping with the financial crisis, which was in full flow at that time.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how people were made redundant from the city, and they were going on to become plumbers and electricians and so on. But it also mentioned a graduate entry program for medicine, which was 4 years instead of 5, where you got some financial help. And I began to look into this, and I more and more I looked into it, the more I thought, this sounds like a great plan. I went off and did a chemistry at A-level night school in Hammersmith. I volunteered, I did work shadowing, all these things. And then I applied to various medical schools, all of which roundly rejected me, apart from, to my surprise, King's College London, which did say yes, again to my surprise. And I started medical school just before my 31st birthday. And then it kind of snowballed from there, really. Obviously, medical school, 4 years, F1, F2, and in my F2 placement, I did a really, really good GP placement. And I was already thinking between psychiatry and GP, and that kind of sealed my intention to go into GP. So that's my unusual story.
Tommy.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to top that, especially with Ed's dual qualifications, chartered accountant, chartered tax advisor, and doctor. I'm just a doctor. But yeah, I did medicine as a second degree also. So I did molecular biology at UCL in London, which, as Ed will acknowledge, is the greatest university in London, significantly better than King's or Poly on the Strand, as we like to call it at UCL. And then I never really wanted to be a doctor. We didn't know any doctors. I just came from a normal working class family, and I was supposed to go on out for lunch with a girl from my course, and at the last minute she cancelled and said she was going to hear about a graduate entry medicine program, and failing to take the hint, I accompanied her to the graduate entry medicine program. I never saw the girl again, but I was sat there listening to it, and I was just thinking, cool, this sounds like really interesting, and like I never considered being a doctor, but yeah, I do have a first-class degree in my hand, and I should probably do something with it. Immediately after graduating from UCL with a first-class degree, I did what UCL would be so proud of me. I went to become a travel rep in Spain, just sailing and windsurfing for the entire season. So yeah, you won't see me any UCL alumni brochures. But I did come back and did a 4-year fast-track medical degree. And then, yeah, that's how I became a doctor. I'll say I just came from a normal working class family, did 2 degrees, 1 in London. So I just had an insane amount of debt when I graduated, and I knew nothing about money. I didn't even know what the starting salary of a doctor was. I thought that they were well paid because I went to a state school, and my state school was really rough. Although I did all right, but anyway, it was really rough. And one of my friends, her dad was a doctor, and she just got parachuted out of there off to private school because the state school was too rough. And I was like, wow, doctors must be really rich. And then I got my first paycheck, and I looked at what was coming in versus the size of my debt repayments. And I was just like, wow, I've got a big problem here. So I started to learn about my own personal finances, like the hard way, not the smart way, like Ed did. And I got quite good at it. Claimed back a load of tax, got my finances in order, paid down all my bad debt, started to learn about investing. And as I did that, sort of helped out a few friends of friends. And eventually I was helping out way too many people, tried to shut it down because I just still wanted to be a doctor. Love being a doctor, still do. And then I bumped into Ed one day when I was doing an A&E locum, and he told me his story, and he was helping a ton of people. And we were like, man, someone should really start something to help doctors, just to teach them, about finances and help them find expert advice if they need it. And so that was where Medics Money started, really.
Fantastic. And so did it start with the podcast, or how did you sort of communicate with the people you wanted to talk to?
Yeah, so back then, anybody who was starting something was on Instagram, on social media. Podcasts weren't really a thing when we started, although they definitely are now. But me and Ed don't really like social media, and we're not very good at social media. So we thought, well, let's just stick what we're good at, which is writing. So we launched our email list to start with and our website. And everybody thought we were crazy. Like, we weren't even on social media. And some people were just like, all right, nice knowing you guys. You're never going to amount to anything. But I think because we doubled down on our strengths, which was email, and we acknowledged that we were terrible on social media, so we didn't even do it, our email list got really big really quickly. And at the moment, is around 55,000 doctors now on that email list. Similarly, our website got really big. And only recently, relatively recently, 3 years ago now, or maybe more. Is it 4 years? When did we start the pod, mate? Can't remember.
It was during as soon as we were allowed to meet up during COVID. So it was like August 2020, I think it was, because I remember we took a photo. We were wearing face masks in your garage where we recorded our first podcast. We were allowed to, but we still wore face masks anyway. And so 2020.
Yeah. And the reason that we started the podcast wasn't because we thought we would be natural at it, quite the opposite, but we were just getting tons of speaking invites from people wanting to hear from us. And there was no way that we could travel around to do them. So we were like, how can we reach the most amount of people, give out the most amount of benefit to our colleagues, but cause ourselves the least inconvenience? And standing in my freezing cold garage, socially distanced, wearing masks, was the only way that we did it. So yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah, I think also what was that kind of phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. I think for us with COVID, we couldn't go and speak to people, face to face like we were expecting we'd be doing, because I just qualified as a GP in the midst of COVID, so I was still doing my exams and everything, so we hadn't really fully taken off because that was a bit of a drag. Obviously me qualifying was a bit more was important as well as Medics Money, so I had to get that out of the way. But then COVID hit, and we thought, well, we can't actually go out to drum up business or go and spread the word, etc. So the podcast just seemed like an actual really good fit in the days of COVID, to spread the message.
Yeah, and so Ed, was there one like main question that was coming to you from the doctors? Is there like one burning thing that they tend to, that sort of kicked it all off?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. So I mean, when Tommy, as we already alluded, we met and then kicked off Medics Money. I mean, we actually met in 2016, I think it was, in A&E. I've been working as an F1 in Guildford. I got posted down to Chichester, and my first placement was in A&E. And just as a bit of background to that, the reason why I think Tommy and other people knew I was an accountant, because I wasn't going around sort of broadcasting it everywhere, is because on the first day we were in this very cramped little staff room in Chichester A&E with the A&E consultant. I think there are 9 trainees that started on that day, and they asked us, for that question I really, really hate, which is, give one interesting fact about yourself. And I thought, what do I do? People would say really exciting things, and I would say something, I've never knew what to say. So I basically said that the most exciting thing I could think of was I used to be an accountant, which probably says more about me than anything else. And that kind of spread a little bit, because people were like, you're an accountant, why are you here? What are you doing, etc. And that kind of spread out. And I think Tommy heard about it that way, because Tommy was locum in A&E at the time, whereas I was a trainee. I just started as an F2 there. And as I say, we began to talk about the fact that a lot of the main thing that at the time that we were quite was coming out was that people didn't really know how to claim back the tax on their employment expenses. So it's something I never really had to think about that much when I was an accountant, because my PwC, they paid for my equipment, they paid for my exams, they paid for my training, they pay for everything. Whereas in the NHS, you basically pay for everything. You pay for your own exams, you pay for the GMC, you pay you know, the BMA if you want to be a member, you pay for your indemnity insurance and so on. And people just didn't know how to claim the money back on that, which I think is how Tommy also got involved before he met me, you know, helping his friends claim their tax back on their expenses. So it's quite common that people just weren't aware that they could. Some people, when they were aware, we saw later on, people would say, oh, it's a waste of time, you know, it's not worth it, you don't get much money back. Well, actually, you do get a lot of money back, of course. So that was a big thing. And I think that also helped drive our business, you know, drive Medics Money as well, because what we did was we created a free step-by-step guide to claiming your expenses, which doctors can download and then use that to claim their money back. So yeah, the big things from doctors were, yeah, how do I claim my money back on my expenses? Another thing, which I won't go into too much, is tax codes. They find that really confusing, understandably, and also just the payslip. That, you know, with the new junior doctor contract, the payslip is so confusing nowadays. A lot of people don't understand what the elements are. But as I said, the key thing really was the tax rebates. That was the main.
So you see that tax treatment, that was are they still big downloads for you? Because I know when I come on the show, we talk a lot about investment, but
yeah, I think we cover everything, you know, but I think what we do quite well at Medics Money is that if you can do something yourself, the basics, we would always encourage someone to do that themselves. So we major on things that people can do themselves. And the other big problem that doctors face, as I'm sure Dennis will attest to, is if doctors did need specialist accountants or specialist financial advice help, it was really hard to know where to get good advice. You know, everybody's out there telling you that they're the best, but who actually is the best? And what we noticed is that a lot of people that claimed they were specialists were nothing of the sort. A lot of financial advisors were restricted financial advisors, but they didn't mention this. And I don't know if Dennis wants to open that can of worms on his podcast. I mean, I'm happy to open it on your podcast, not mine. But you know, doctors didn't know where to find advisors and who to trust. And of course, with our unique skill set, we could instantly know within, you know, like in the same way that one doctor knows another good doctor, with our skill set, we could instantly screen who were actually accountants that actually understood doctors and had a track record of working with loads of doctors. And same for financial advisors. And we put them all on one platform and we connected those that do need help with those advisors. So that was a kind of second big need that we addressed for doctors, which is essentially, if you do need help, where can you get that help?
Yeah, and that's how we got to know you, through being one of those people on your directory. And Dennis, I know you talk to Tommy quite a lot on the podcast, so you've had a lot of conversations with doctors as well. And when you hear them talking about, this is a question you get quite a bit, leaving the NHS pension scheme. And I know this comes up on your podcast a lot as well, Tommy and Ed. What do you say to them, Dennis?
I ask why first, but which is a bit flippant. But I mean, this is the NHS pension scheme is like public service schemes, is incredibly generous. You can't match these schemes in the wider world anymore. Final salary schemes have all but disappeared. So to find something that provides that level of guarantee, and if you look at the amount of contribution that's going in from the employer, it's a huge amount of money. And when we've seen how low annuity rates have been, and you know, if they get inflation under control, annuity rates are always going to be relatively low. The amount of money that somebody has to accumulate to try and match those benefits is probably beyond the capabilities of most people. You know, super high earners, yes, but then if you're having to keep funneling that money away, and the problem with being a super high earner is that you can't build up pension contributions tax efficiently because of your, you know, you breach income thresholds, you then get tapering, you don't have the ability to put that kind of money into the scheme. So, you know, the NHS pension scheme is terrific, and essentially it's a risk-free income in retirement. So why would you want to pull out?
Yeah, and I think like that's a big part of Medics Money, is just busting these myths. You know, doctors like to talk to other doctors about finances. Now, I would always talk to another doctor about medicine because they know a lot about medicine, but most doctors unfortunately don't know that much about finances, and that's because we've never had any financial education throughout our entire career. And that can lead to us making really big mistakes, and Dennis is already outlining one there. And it's just, whenever I do a podcast with someone like Dennis on our podcast, I always say, look, Dennis, you can't have access to the NHS pension. You've got a private pension. Would you swap your private pension for my NHS pension?
In a heartbeat.
Yeah, exactly. But, because doctors don't know who to trust and they can't get good quality advice, it can lead to them making some rogue decisions. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest ones. The NHS pension, really important part of our overall reward package. Still a great scheme. Yep, it's definitely got some problems, and if you are a high earner and you are bouncing off those tax thresholds, you're probably going to need to get advice about it. It's a nice problem to have, but yeah, I think just listen to what Dennis just said about he would swap his SIP. I imagine your SIP is pretty well invested as well, Dennis.
My SIP is invested in exactly the way we talk about index funds, and the lowest cost index funds I can find to give me global exposure. I'm too busy doing other things, trying to outguess the market, and we know I'm not going to be able to do that consistently. So it's that medical analogy. I take my own medicine. I'm telling everyone to go for low cost index trackers, and I'm doing the same myself.
Yep, we're all in on that medicine as well. Of course, me and Ed definitely have an NHS pension, which we're really fortunate to have, and we maximize out. But we also have other investments around that, and we follow a very similar philosophy to you, Dennis. So good.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that brings me on to another one of my questions, because when we sort of go out and about doing presentations to GPs and consultants, and then at the end of the presentation we'll have a chat, and they'll talk about how they've been talking with their colleagues and their peer groups about the sort of next new shiny thing. Crypto always comes up, and so my impression is that you sort of do talk a lot about it, and that kind of influences decisions. What do you say when people come to you asking about those kind of things?
Yeah, so I've just done a YouTube. This week's YouTube is videos about crypto. So I do not own any cryptocurrency, and I've outlined that in several places. But in short, the reasons for that are: one, I don't like non-productive assets. So productive asset is a company that delivers goods or services, makes money, you buy a share of that company, and over time, maybe that will go up over time. A non-productive asset doesn't have anything or doesn't do anything, like gold, non-productive asset. Crypto, another non-productive asset. Two, I don't really understand crypto. Like, is it a currency? If it is, why can't I spend it in the shop? Is it a store of value? If it is a store of value, why is it so volatile? Like, a store of value needs to be boring and stable. Crypto is not the same. And I guess the final part of why I don't any crypto is, I think even your most dedicated crypto fanatic would say that it is a high risk investment. And if I can hit my investing goals and my life goals by maintaining my super boring low cost tracker, which I don't do anything, all I do is top it up every month automatically via direct debit. I never look at it. I never change it. I never sell it. I never switch to another fund. I've got a strategy. It's working very well. So if I don't need to take any additional risk, why would I add any additional risk into the mix? And I guess, like, the fourth point, to Dennis's point, is I'm really busy running other companies. I'm a GP partner. I run Medic's Money. And if I'm thinking about where can an hour of my time deliver the most value, is it going to be guessing which crypto coin is going to be big next? Or is it going to be improving my GP practice so that I can improve the care to my patients and make more money there? Or doing something with Medic's Money? There's much more leverage available to me and utilizing my skills in my current businesses, which I control and own, rather than taking a punt on crypto. But I don't know, like some financial advisors are kind of saying, okay, look, you could dedicate 5% of your portfolio to it. And I can kind of see that argument. But for me, that's why I don't own any crypto. But I don't know what Dennis and Ed and you think, Sarah, because it is a hot topic.
Well, I do own some crypto, but only because I want to understand how it works. I get asked a lot of questions. I've dabbled in all kinds of crazy investments, with the only view is to try and understand how and why people might want them. So I've gone into crypto at a very small amount. Money I can afford to lose. Can you afford to lose money? Money I'm be prepared to lose. And so, start with £1,000 or so, see what happens. I have no idea why it went up. I have no idea why it went down again. It went up again, and I took my original stake out. And then I've seen it over the last few years do all kinds of things. I've had my money back. I've still got some crypto. But what I do find is it's incredibly expensive to get in and out. You're dealing with bits of a Bitcoin with these long string of numbers. And so when you find out what the dealing fees are between moving it here, there, and everywhere, and sending it to a different wallet over here, unless you do the calculation, the spreads on this thing to deal are huge. You can lose a lot of your value just by shifting it around the web, trying to do transactions with it. And and actually, if you haven't got much crypto left, which I haven't, trying to get it out back into sterling seems almost impossible.
Sorry, I was just giggling at Ed's cat jumping on his lap.
Yeah, he
We
very
like
much loves
that.
he loves to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
Is he in crypto, Ed? That's what we need to know. Is he in crypto?
He's very secretive about his investments. He won't tell me, so I suspect he might be.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ed, what about you? Are you in crypto?
No, never. Some would say boring, some would say very sensible. But yeah, I've never been in crypto. I don't know enough about it. I don't. As Tommy's pointed out, it's so volatile. I just get a bit nervous about it. So, like you guys, I put my investments into, index-linked funds and the same stuff that you guys have said. So yeah, very stayed in my approach. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I definitely have friends that got swept up in it and have invested in it. And friends from the accountancy world rather than the medicine world. I don't know of any medical friends that have invested. But yeah, I've kind of steer well clear of it for now.
So I'll ask you a tax question then, Ed. So we talk about that instead. Often when people make investment decisions, they're based on the sort of tax treatment. And as Dennis said to me the other day, there's that expression, don't let the tax tail wag the investment dog. So with your accountancy background, would you agree with that?
I mean, absolutely. A lot of people seemingly get quite fixated with tax, and it can really kind of overly sway their decision making. And we know that tax is important and needs to be needs to be thought about, but kind of looked at in the round rather than this kind of be all and end all for decision making. I mean, a really common example for doctors, which we get asked a huge amount, is this idea that kind of incorporating a company is some sort of panacea for saving tax. I mean, as we know, it's become a lot less favourable setting up a company for tax purposes. But moreover, is it actually the right fit for these doctors? With this added admin burden, they need to extract the money out of the company. People just kind of think, oh, company, it's lower tax, it must be the right thing to do. I want to save tax. But actually, you've got to think about the commercials and all the other facets as well. To a lesser extent, because we don't really get after this sort of question very much, but to a lesser extent, people think about trusts as a way to save tax, which of course, again, might be the case, might be the right thing to do. But is a trust the right thing for them to do and for their estates? But yeah, a lot of people get very fixated by this idea. It's tax is lower doing this. I've got to do this, and they need to really think about everything all in one.
Yeah.
And I think the thing we see around that is when they're getting hit with penalties for pension contributions, if they're high earners, they'll automatically look for the thing that will give them the same tax relief or similar. So then that's enterprise investment schemes and venture capital trusts. But nobody's then looking at the completely different risk profile of jumping into that kind of investment. They're just focusing on getting that 30% tax relief. But if there's probably a better than evens chance of physically losing all that money, why would you get the tax relief just to throw, just to lose the money? There are good reasons for investing in things like EIS and VCT, and we have some clients that do that. But you need a good spread. It's a smaller part of your overall portfolio, and it's not driven by tax. There are other reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like the way that I think about this is like the core and satellite approach. Like, so the core of my investment portfolio will always be my stocks and shares ISA and my lifetime ISA, which is in boring index funds. And yeah, if you want to bolt on a satellite to that, maybe 5% of your portfolio in crypto or something else higher risk, fine. But in my view, I favor the core and satellite approach. And over the years, I've gotten rid of a lot of satellites because the satellites looked good on paper, but never worked out. And I'm just left with my core, which is the pension and the stocks and shares and lifetime ISA, which might be boring, but it's doing the job. Thanks very much. And I don't have to do anything to maintain it. I literally don't do anything to it. It's just totally idiot proof. It's on autopilot. I very rarely look at it. I very rarely think about my investments. I logged into one of my accounts the other day and it said last login was 2022. I was like, ooh, probably left that one a bit long, but it's just there on direct debit, ticking over, no problem. Like, yeah.
And I think the problem is some people just find this sort of like first step quite hard to make. So, you're all sort of talking, or we're all sort of talking about the things that we have. But sometimes sort of making the first step to get there can be quite hard. You're very busy people, we've got a lot else on, doctors have got so much to do. So what would you say would be the first thing if someone just said, I don't have time, I can't apply my mind to it, what would you tell them to do to sort of kickstart the process?
Yeah, I guess this is something that I can directly empathize with because I have no financial training, no qualifications in finance like Ed or like Dennis. And I did come from nothing essentially, because when I left university, my net worth was minus £85,000, which is the debt that I owed. I did own a Peugeot 306, which was probably worth about £450. So, knock that off. But that was my only asset in life. Okay. And so when I got my first payslip and then I looked at my debt repayments and panic struck in, I just went back to basics, So get back to basics. And it's a trigger word for some people, but all you got to do is spend less than you earn, right? If you can do that, you're going to be ahead. So to spend less than you earn, you need I'm going to say the B word, budget, which everyone's all like, it's a trigger word, but you do need a budget. Okay. If you don't know what you're spending your money on and what your income is and what your outgoings are, you're never going to get a handle on it. So just start really simple, get a budget. Once you've got a budget and you've generated some spare cash each month, and that might only be a couple of, might only be 20, 50 pounds or something. I remember when I first started investing back in 2019, the investment minimum on the platform was £200. I only invested 4 times that year because I was doing £50 and it seemed utterly pointless. And to your point, it was hard to get started. But now those small amounts have just compounded over the last 14 years and it definitely doesn't seem pointless now. So yeah, I'll just start with the budget. Have a think about a disaster plan. Like, if you get ill and can't work, I do think everybody needs to think about protection. You could maybe think about your sick leave, think about the benefits that the NHS pension gives you, but rarely, in my experience, are they sufficient. And then once you've done that, channel all that spare money into either overpaying your high interest rate bad debt, the debt that's of like 19% if you've got credit card debt, which is what I did. Once you've paid off that high interest rate debt, then you could start to think about deploying that spare money, which your budget has allowed you for, to other more exciting things like investing maybe. But I don't know, Dennis is the one to ask here, but I would just say, just start small. And if you just do one thing, just get a budget. And a budget sounds fancy, but it's just a spreadsheet. What's coming in, what's going out, make a list, work out what you don't need, get rid of those, file the rest of what's spare into a savings account automatically every month, and off you go.
But even for some people, the word spreadsheet is going to be, just a barrier. Notebook and pen, or notebook and pencil, just to start jotting down. And I think sometimes, the people you come across have some great ideas. I was working with a young couple who they knew what they wanted to do, but they couldn't budget in a way. But they'd worked out that if they were a young family, she wanted to take time off to bring the children up. And to do that, they had to accumulate a sum of money, but the spending was a little bit out of control. So knowing themselves, she said, well, so I go to work and every day I'm going to go to the cash point and withdraw a £10 note from the cash point, and that's my spending money. And if I want to go out at the end of the week, I can't spend all of that £10 that day. But that's what my allowance says I have to do. Really, really simple thing to do. So you find simple mechanisms, and I think that's what you were saying there, simple mechanisms to help you achieve what you want to achieve. And it doesn't have to be a complicated, convoluted, structured plan that's, someone like me might come up with. It's at the end of the week, I need to have that amount of money remaining in my bank account to get to where I want to go.
Yeah. And so touching on working with someone like you,
Yeah.
we're starting at what can we do to start off with, and that's going to start at a certain age, probably, when Tommy, as you said, when you sort of you qualified and then you get your first pay slip and you're a bit shocked because you've got all this debt and then you need to pay it off. So you're going to have a bit of a period where you're going to be doing that. So when does someone start working, or when would a doctor or consultant or any other person start working with someone like you, Dennis?
The problem is, I think, just opening an account for somebody to start working with them has a cost. And actually, if I'm dealing with somebody at the beginning of their career or very early on, they've got other priorities and other needs. It's not difficult, as Tommy was saying earlier, to say that I need to reduce my expensive debt. I need to build up an emergency fund. If I haven't bought a house, I probably want to start building up some money in order to get a deposit. So you're thinking about lifetime ISAs or things like that. That information is already out there. I think that what happens is there's so much chatter on the internet, there's so much chatter around the bar or wherever you go, and people have got great ideas, that we think that this financial planning stuff is complicated. And it really isn't. It might become onerous, in terms of time. The busier you get as you get older and you have more things and more balls in your more plates spinning. But things really should be kept incredibly simple. So I tend to work with people and I can add value as they're approaching, I suppose, that 10, 15 years before retirement. They've got significant earnings. The pension funds are probably bigger. They've got some ISAs of reasonable standing. The kids are probably just about to leave home, so there's more surplus coming in. And they're looking for some guidance and some structure. And that big question, how much is enough? At what point can I get off the hamster wheel? And help me with that. It's the conversations I have, and as Tommy knows, are rarely about investment strategy. Because if they haven't got it at that point, we just tell them to buy index trackers. Let's start looking at what you need to do with your life. How much do you put away? Have you got that protection in place? What are you thinking about doing for the children? Do you want to help them on the property ladder? Can you afford to do that? Or is that just pipe dreams? The planning conversations, that's where I add value. Telling people where to invest, that all information is out there. Just buy that low-cost index tracker.
Okay, perfect. Right. Well, talking about retirement then. Now, I might be getting this wrong, Ed and Tommy, but I think that the default retirement age for doctors has been phased out, has gone. But research, I was looking at it before coming on the podcast, says that most doctors are retiring at around 60. Do you both want to practice that long? Do doctors want to practice that long? And if not, what can they do about it?
Yeah, I think this is like a really big issue that a lot of doctors are potentially sleepwalking into because, as you said, back in the day, the good old 1995 NHS pension section, the retirement age was 60 or 55 if you had special class status. Then the 2008 scheme came in and the retirement age was pushed out to 65. Now the 2015 scheme, which all active members are now in, thanks to McLeod, the state retirement age is linked to the NHS pension retirement age is linked to state retirement age. So for me, that's 68.
Yeah,
and yeah, so I think this is massive for a lot of doctors because I talk to a lot of doctors and they say, oh no, I'm definitely not working till 68. And I'm like, cool, what's your plan to, not work 68? They're like, yeah, I haven't thought that far ahead. So I think you got to start planning it now. Like I know me and Ed already way been planning this for a long time because to answer your question, do we want to work till 68? I don't know, but probably not. But I want to have the option to say maybe when I get to 60, say, do you know what? I'm done. I've had my fun and I want to retire. Oh, wait, it's 8 years until I can draw my NHS pension. Well, I could take the actuarial reductions and take it early, which they're actuarially calculated, but they are, you do lose a lot. I think it's about 4 to 5% of the pension per year taken early. Dennis will correct me, my maths on that. Or you can have a plan to fill in that gap between your desired retirement age and your actual retirement age. And this is something that me and Ed think about and talk about a lot, because we both still work as GPs, but we are doing less and less work as GPs compared to when we first started Medics Money, because we love being GPs, but we also love helping our colleagues in Medics Money as well. And so to have the option to retire when you decide, not when the government decides, I think is going to be an underrated asset in the future. And a lot of doctors are not aware of this, or they're looking at their colleagues who are retiring at 60 now on the 1995 scheme and thinking, oh, they're all right. Well, the game has changed a bit, and I think something, but I don't know. I'm really interested because Dennis has more of these conversations than I do. What do you think, Dennis?
Well, it's exactly that. Some people, you used the word earlier, it's the option, the ability to choose what you're doing. Some people love it. I was speaking yesterday to a dentist in his 74th year. He still loves getting into people's mouths. I don't know why, but he does. And so, if he can do that a couple of days a week, so this is not full time, but he can do that a couple of days a week, and he's still got the physical and mental capability of doing that, he'll do it because he absolutely loves the job. But what if he couldn't? And what if he didn't want to? Then you need to be able to bridge the gap. And that is where those, the pension isn't going to do it. Why would you take a severe actuarial reduction? It is significant. So you need to build up other assets. And I think, and again, that's not an investment question so much as where do I put the money? It's about making sure you put some money away in a pot, whether that's an ISA or a trading account or something else, to build up another pot of money that you treat as that interim pension until both the state and the NHS cut in.
Yeah, and I guess it's great to talk about retirement, but some younger listeners might be listening thinking, well, retirement's a long way off, doesn't really apply to me. Perhaps that was maybe my mindset at one stage, but it's definitely not now. But if you start this early, you can actually get these options to work less earlier in your career. So one of the reasons that me and Ed were able to just give up some GP work and start Medics Money was that we had our own personal finances in a sort of state where we could just work 2 days or 3 days as the GP and 2 days on Medics Money. And so, it gives you the option. You've got that option. And if you don't do anything, the default option is to work until you're 68 and or state retirement age and go from there. So I think you just start early and think about it early, because I am a way better 2-day-a-week doctor than I was when I was doing 8 days a week. I would be, the reason I met Ed in A&E is because I was doing a locum. So I'd done all my work for the week. I was like, I need more money. I'm broke. I'm going to go and do a weekend locum shift in A&E and then straight back to full-time work the next week after that. That was a miserable existence and I had to do it. But now I've got the option and I do 2.5 days GP. I love it. And I do 2.5 days Medics Money. I love that as well. But if you don't make these choices and plan ahead, you may not get that option unless you're independently wealthy, in which case you don't even need to listen to this podcast.
Or maybe you do. We've met those independently wealthy people that aren't able to keep hold of it too long. Because they are chasing the big winners. But there we are. I was just going to cut in here because we were talking about this earlier. Where do you start? Where did you start, Tommy and Ed, to get that investment advice? So, what are the books you read, or where did you go in order for you to say, actually, what I'd want is a low-cost index tracker, rather than the XYZ fund manager flavor of the month fund?
So I think for myself, I actually started my investments, personal finances, a bit later again than a lot of people, because I spent a lot of my money putting myself through medical school that time. So I didn't really start until sort of mid-30s. But for me, I guess, for my personal circumstances, was very lucky in that a lot of my friends are accountants, and they all had, already gone down this journey and what they invested in. So I basically asked for a lot of advice from my friends about which funds to go for, which investment platforms to use, what they did. Obviously, I did my own research. Don't get me wrong; I didn't just jump in whatever they did. But they said, "Oh, here's what we do. Here's what we've done." And I thought, you know what? Okay, I'll go away and look at that. And and that's how I went about doing it. So I didn't read any books. I just got lots of advice from people that had already gone through that journey. But as I say, all of them were from my old firm, PwC or onwards.
Yeah, for me, it was much more convoluted because I started from a zero knowledge base, like I knew nothing. And in my final year of medical school, I went to a talk from a financial advisor, in inverted commas, slash salesperson. And they were just there pushing products at us, and they were talking about protection and actively manage investments. And I was asking all kinds of questions like, why do I need it? You know, are you the best person to buy it from? Why is my medical school recommending you? Is this a paid promotion or what? And the good thing about coming from a working class background is that I paid my way through medical school by working in a bike shop doing sales. And when I was trying to give someone the hard sell on a bike, which they couldn't really afford, I'd say, but you know, we can do you an interest-free credit. Yeah. So you can buy the bike today, ride away today, and then get some interest-free credit. And that was just my sales patter. And then I was at this presentation at med school and I was asking all kinds of awkward questions and they were getting really annoyed with me. And they said, wow, the first year is free. They said the first year is free. And I was just like, red alert, red alert. This is a salesperson, not somebody who's got my interests at heart. And so I started off naturally suspicious. My brother is an independent financial advisor. He talked me through that kind of distinction. And I was just like, whoa, what, how did they not mention the fact that they were restricted financial advisors and my medical school recommends them? I don't know why. And then his investment philosophy has been shaped over many, many years, similar to yours, Dennis. I read a ton of books. And I guess I think doctors struggle with the idea that you've got these active fund managers who are really highly paid. Some of them are like celebrities and their fund fees are really high. They run around in red braces. They talk an amazing game. They sound highly educated. But when you actually get into the data, the vast majority of them cannot outperform a low cost index tracker. And that just took me ages to get my head around. It just seems like everything that I know in life is just work really hard, max out everything, and you'll do okay. And then investing is the opposite. It's like buy a low cost index tracker, no advice. Do nothing, you know, keep topping it up. Don't buy and sell. Don't read the Financial Times. In fact, ignore what the financial press say to you and ignore the people in red braces on Wall Street. And in 20 or 30 years' time, you'll be absolutely fine. And that was quite a mindset shift for me. So that took me a long time to kind of get my head around. And that's something that we try to work on in Medix Money. Often people say to us, oh, what investments do you buy? And that's just like, oh, facepalm moment, because you shouldn't be asking us what investments do we buy. You should be instead trying to think about developing your own investment philosophy. Like, what is your view on active versus passive management? You know, do you believe buying a global tracker and doing nothing for 20 years is going to work? Because the best strategy for you is going to be the one that you can stick with long term and not get distracted by shiny things. So yeah, my investment journey was pretty convoluted. Books wise, if we're looking for recommendations, although I consider it a bit simple now, I think a great place to start is J.L. Collins, How to Own the World. No, wait, what's it called? Simple Path to Wealth. Yeah, Simple Path to Wealth, J.L. Collins. Just kind of explains this in detail, but there's so many books out there that can help you. And I still think some sections of, I'm going to say your industry, Dennis, but I'm tarring you with the same brush there. But some sections of the financial advice industry have a vested interest in selling very expensive investment propositions to their clients, which they are handsomely rewarded for. But actually, if you crunch numbers, do not outperform a basic index fund. So on that bombshell, I'll hand the mic to Dennis.
Well, it's true though. We look at that. You can always find fund managers, and because they're touted every Saturday and Sunday in the broadsheets, who have got great 1 year or even 3 year performance figures. But this being able to sustain that over 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. I mean, if we look back over the last year, the number of fund managers that might have outperformed the S&P 500 could be something like 60%. So you've got a better than average probability of getting a fund manager who will outperform. But over 3 years, that drops below 50%. By the time you get to a 20-year period, you've less than 10% of active fund managers, if they're around, because bad funds get closed quite frequently, fund managers move on. You've got a very small proportion of fund managers who've consistently over that period, and not every year, but over that period, been able to outperform the S&P 500. And if you look at the last 20 years of Warren Buffett and his fund, That has pretty much matched the S&P 500 over the last 20 years. It was the previous 20 years where he made all of those gains. So even, wealthiest investor in the world, Warren Buffett, hasn't been able to outperform recently the S&P 500 consistently over a long period of time. And
Yeah,
if you
and
think, if you think that you say, well, I'm going to get out of the bad ones and into the good ones, you say, well, yeah, but every time you have to make a decision, mathematically, you're opening yourself up to making a poor decision. It's the buy and hold bit that keeps you in the game and helps you win.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that. There will always be statistical anomalies, managers that manage to outperform the market over long term. There's a tiny, tiny percentage though. And not only do you need to choose that right manager, right, of all of the thousands of managers, you need to be able to do it retrospectively. So you need to go back in time for 50 years ago and go, I know Warren Buffett's just some upstart from the middle of America who hasn't got a great track record, but he's the guy. I'm going to choose that guy. And if you manage to do that and choose him out of all of the other ones, then great, you're winning. But it's just about investing is just like, for me, is like a game of maximizing my chance of succeeding, and succeeding for me is hitting my life goals. So it's like on one extreme is like gambling, going into a casino, putting it all on red or green or whatever. And at the other end is, holding.
It's red or black, isn't it?
There you go. I'm not a gambler. I'm not a gambler. But anyway, one end is gambling. The other end is just doing nothing and holding it all in cash, which historically has not been a great strategy because of inflation and lots of other reasons. And in the middle ground is a sensible investing strategy, which is low maintenance, low cost, and highly likely to hit your goals. And I just don't have the confidence to be able to predict the future and predict which of today's investment managers is the next Warren Buffett, and lots of other people don't too. And I know this is probably getting a bit geeky, but I love looking at the SPIVA scores, so SPIVA scores.
Yeah,
you should definitely check them out. I know Dennis has, but just for the benefit of everyone, they kind of compare doing nothing strategy, chill out, low cost index strategy versus the active strategy. And in the long term, and then we are talking about long term here, the stats of an active manager outperforming are just terrible, like terrible.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned those before, haven't we, on the podcast?
The SPIVA,
yeah. Okay, right. So I'm going to ask you one last question, Ed and Tommy. Obviously, you've recorded, I don't know how many podcasts, quite a lot. And tell me how many downloads now? I mean, you've hit some amazing numbers.
Yeah, we went past 1 million downloads, which is just crazy because our podcast's super niche, and super grateful for everyone that supported us. And since we hit 1 million, I actually haven't looked, so I don't know what we're at now.
It's probably 2 now.
Boring now. Yeah.
It's the compounding effect.
Okay, but obviously you've got a lot of messages out there, but if you could only record one more podcast for your listeners, it's your last one, you can't do any more after this, so it has to be really important, what would that be about?
Ed, do you want to go first, mate?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are lots of topics I think would be very worthy. One, because just like Dennis said, we do get a lot of people saying about how they think about pulling out the NHS pension. So something about the NHS pension and the benefits of it. Some about investment. I mean, to be honest, I think I would probably do a podcast on income protection. That would probably be the one that I would do, just to remind people of the importance of thinking about income protection. And other things like life assurance and so on. But obviously I don't want to steal Tommy's thunder because that may be what he was going to say. But from our experience, I mean in Tommy's case, we know about the importance of having income protection, because you just never know what's going to happen in the future. And of course, if an accident happens or something happens, it's very important to have that in place. So I would probably stress the importance of that, to protecting your biggest asset, which is yourself.
I just lost a bet with myself because I had a tenor in my head on Ed either saying national insurance, which is his favorite topic and my least favorite topic, or something tax related. And he's just totally thrown a curveball in there. So I did not expect that. So it shows after 300 odd episodes together, I still don't know what Ed's going to say. I think I would just stress the basics. If you do the basics well, spend less than you earn, get a budget, think about protection, as Ed just mentioned, and then pay off your bad debts and consider investing. Plan for your future by getting your pension sorted. If you just did that, that's like 90% of the struggle. So don't overcomplicate it. Just stick to the basics. So I'd probably just do a really boring one on the basics, because I think if you do the basics well, you'll be fine. But if you do nothing, it's probably not going to be fine.
No.
What would you do, Dennis?
Oh, if I had a last one,
Yeah.
I would want to focus on simplicity rather than complexity and show the correlation between complexity in financial advice and cost and poorer outcomes. And I think you can look across anything in the world where complexity has been brought in, it's usually been at the cost of the end user.
Okay. Tommy, I thought you might say income protection as well, actually, based on what happened to you. I don't know, was it last year?
Yeah, last April.
Yeah. How is your hand now?
Amazing. It's back on. So yeah, I chopped off most of my hand using a saw. This hand. Are we doing YouTube? But if you are on YouTube,
Yeah, we can see it.
yeah, my hand's great. It was a long road. Incredibly grateful for everyone that helped me. And it was like a true team NHS effort, right? From the paramedics who came to my house initially, air ambulance who came to collect me, flew me to St. George's, the incredible team at St. George's, especially my surgeon, Mr. Jamil Moladina, spent 17 hours. I arrived with most of my hand in a bag of frozen sweet corn. 17 hours later, Mr. Moladina and his entire team, it was back on. So yeah, incredible. And yeah, I guess I didn't want to like mention too much, but I had all my protection in order. So it was a terrible accident and definitely affected me massively, but it hasn't affected my finances at all, like at all. And that's not because I did nothing. It's because I had a plan, a financial plan, and that plan was laid down many, many years ago, and the plan worked. So yeah, living proof that even if you do something really stupid and chop your hand off, not only will your NHS colleagues put you back together physically, but financially, if you've got the right plan, hasn't affected me. And yeah, it's kind of, I was a bit all in on FIRE, financial independence, retire early.
Yeah,
I was heading towards that. And it's kind of shifted it a bit, really, because I was off work as a doctor for 9 or 10 months and I really missed it. And now I'm back and I'm loving it. And it's kind of made me, cover your ears, Dennis, but I'm spending more and saving less at the moment because I was on track to hit FIRE pretty early. And I've just sort of realized that I probably don't want to FIRE when I'm 50 and I still love being a doctor. So yeah, I've got the option to do that, which is amazing. But yeah, it's kind of changed my perspectives a little bit on that. So yeah.
I find a lot of people think they want to retire at a particular age, and when they get there and try it, yes, you get out of it, and probably different for you with no hand initially at the beginning of an enforced time off work. But if you've chosen to take time off work and you've got all of your faculties, and you can only do so many holidays and so many trips, and you get all of that out of your system, and then what? And they invariably go back to work, and they can do that through choice. And we come back to that. Having sufficient money to make the choice as to whether you want to stop or not is a better position to be in than either being forced to work or not able to work and not having enough money.
Definitely. It's like the famous quote, or maybe it's not famous, but it's a quote that I like from Seth Rogen, an American author. He says, try to create a life that you don't need a holiday from. And that's kind of where I am. Like I said, I've got a really nice balance in my life. I do some medicine, some medics money, and I feel like I could go on forever now. And that definitely has not always been the case for me. Like, I was a bit burnt out in medicine at one stage, and that was where my quest for FIRE began. And yeah, I probably will have the option to FIRE really, really early if I want to. But right now, I've got zero intention of taking that. But I've only got that option because I started early, did the basics well. So yeah, do the basics well is the message from this one, I think.
Yeah,
it is.
It's a brilliant one to end on as well. Ed and Tommy, I think we probably could talk all day, but we can't keep you that long. So thank you so much for coming on our podcast and for your podcast as well, which is brilliant. And I know, Dennis, you enjoy.
I do. I get to talk about things I want to talk about because we're on the same page, which is really good.
Yeah, and I just want to say, thank you for having us on your podcast. Hopefully, we didn't take up too much time, but also, thank you for doing it because getting everyone access to high quality financial education would be a great start. And your podcast is amazing. I listen to it as well. So Yeah, and I know how difficult it is to produce a podcast regularly. So thank you so much for doing it and sharing your knowledge with the wider community.
We're just getting into our stride.